primitive archery. Primitive archery at its finest. What the heck are you talking about, John? It's a motorcycle, it's not primitive archery. But let me back up a few years. I believe it was in 1986. I lived in Jackson, Michigan. Had been married probably about a year. Maybe not that much. Not that long. There was a motorcycle shop in Jackson, Michigan. It probably is still there. Earl's Cycle Center. I think it was on Page Avenue. Let me get a little closer so I don't hit the L. And Earl's Cycle Center was owned by a guy named Earl, who was retiring and then turning the shop over to his son Dick DeGraw, who, BTW, competed on Pentons in ISDTs. A mechanical genius. That's neither here nor there. Well, they had in their back room, in their storage cubby, motorcycles that had been sitting in crates for many years. Earl was one of these guys that if he didn't like you, you knew it. But for some reason, I walked in there one day, he liked me. Earl actually acted like he liked me. And so he made me an offer. He said, hey, John, I have a, I think it was a 1964. Could have been a 65. BSA, oh, your blood is going now. A BSA Victor 500 MX, or a BSA Victor 50 MX, whatever. It's a single cylinder motocross bike. Motocross had a different meaning back then in the early 60s than it does now. He was going to sell me this BSA Victor 0 miles because it was still in the crate and it's been sitting there for 20 something years for the price that it would have sold for in the early 60s, $1,000. And so I ran home. Wife, not going to mention any names here. I just got my Visa card, my first credit card that I ever had, $1,000 limit. And how fortunate, because I was just offered a 0 miles, 20-something-year-old BSA motorcycle, motocross bike for $1,000. I can buy it with my new Visa card. Put the kibosh on it. I tried to explain it. In this case, there are two genders. There's men and there's women. Men would have gone for this vintage motocross bike, a BSA, a freaking BSA for $1,000. You know, in the 80s, in the mid to late 80s. But you know, I relented. I was Murrayed. Yep. Okay, moving right along, and this has everything to do with primitive archery. I am a child of the 60s and the 70s, and my dad was a motorcyclist. I loved off-road more than he did, and so I'd go to this place called Warrior Hill. And back then, there was a different idea of what a fast off-road bike, motocross bike was. There was no supercross, and there was no triple jumps and backflips like the X Games. And these were beasts that in many respects resembled road bikes. But they had big knobby tires and different handlebars, blah, blah, blah. And so, in 73, 19 of 73, Yamaha came out with the RT3. It was a 360 Enduro. In 74, it turned into the DT360. But this 360, this Enduro slash motocross bike, because one could be the other really, you put lights on it, it's an Enduro, was a beast. People, you can't ride a 360 off-road. It will kill you. It is just much too powerful. It was a whole different scheme back then. But let me tell you, if you were to go buy, I don't even know what they're making now, a KTM 500 Enduro with like 3 miles of travel, plush suspension, probably 14 or so, lightweight, air-cooled, powerful, and you were riding it as fast as you were capable on a trail. In my mind, and a lot of people's mind that are invested in vintage motocross, it was just as exciting. It would just be as exciting as riding an antique bike from the 70s. Wow, that's funny. Because those things had 4 inches of travel. They were heavy. They had bad handling. And so it was like, you have the same excitement level, but the speeds and the difficulties are different because your legs were the suspension. My dirt bikes were Pentons. I had a 175, I believe the Penton was a hair scrambler, either a KTM or a Sachs engine, I forget. I apologize to Sachs if it was a Sachs engine. I had a 250 Penton with a KTM engine, definitely. 4 inches of suspension on both. That's not much for a dirt bike. But I also had a KTM 400, bored out and blueprinted, 14 inches of travel. It wasn't as much fun to me. It was a lot faster. It had 70 horsepower at the rear wheel. It was dyno tested. But as far as excitement and fun, I had more fun on that 250. Let me tell you, when you're winding a KTM 250, and those things had engines that were just as powerful as today. They just didn't have the rolling chassis that were equal to today's. When you hit a 5-foot ramp winding out in 6th gear, which would have been about 90 miles an hour, that's exciting. I appreciated that. It was harder to ride, but it was more challenging. I love it. Okay, primitive Archie, how does that relate? What you are seeing behind me is a road bike, a vintage road bike, 1978 SR500. And I was thinking, this thing has gone through several transformations. You saw a minor one going from the regular handlebars to the 8 painters. But I bought it bone stock. By the way, digressing again, I bought this from a place using the internet, the interweb. I originally wanted to get a Honda CL450, a classic bike with the big upswept, lots of chrome on the pipes, beautiful scrambler. Looks like Batman. It had the blue tank and the black graphics. It kind of looked like a Batman. But they had just sold it. And so he said, hey, I have this beautiful SR500. It's like, that's a good jumping off point. And so I've enjoyed this thing a lot. I live in an area with twisty roads, tunnel of trees, heritage highway, 1.5 lanes, many miles, lots of turns. And the only real frustrating thing is when I'm behind big baggers and full-dressed motorcycles of a certain ilk. There's a lot of them. Because I have to pass them. Because this thing cannot outrun them on the straights, but on the corners, it's started out in life as a 360-pound, very narrow, very agile bike, 500, a thumper. You heard it thumping. It is still, even with the ape hangers, it's a nice bike. I cut everything off that doesn't make it run. You don't see a tach and a speedometer and a key and a battery and all this stuff. So it probably went down to, there's a point to this, probably about 300 pounds. Now the Yamaha DT360 and the RT3, basically the same bikes, I believe were about 275 pounds plus or minus. So this is in the range of one of those things. So I am thinking, I want to travel back in time. I want to do something that is challenging. And I want to turn this into a scrambler. I need to get new rear shocks, of course. I'm not going to change the forks. I'm going to put a different weight fork oil in them. I have as much suspension, believe it or not, as an old motocross bike on this thing. So, you know, you can see where the challenge is. Different tires. It has a smaller tire than you would think of as a dirt bike, because usually they have, you know, what, 21-inch rims. This has a 19. But such is life. Knobbies. I'm going to have to manufacture a different exhaust because this one would work. You know it's high enough, but style counts, so I need to put a scrambler exhaust in this. Manufacture a high exhaust. I need to study this triple crown up here. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't want to change it out with like a TT500 or an XT500, but there's probably some way. I see a couple bolts back there. Do something on there to actually put a front fender, not a low one like a road, but a high one. Paint it black, you know, it has to match that, and it has to be steel, no plastic. The gas tank, sorry, but I'm going to strip that off. And if you're familiar with the old Huskies, they had the color and then they had the chrome or polished steel or polished aluminum or whatever. I'm going to go that route and come up with an emblem. And so, the transformation, I am going to turn this into a scrambler. Goodbye White Wall, goodbye Avon Speedmaster. I think this would be a fun little trip. down scrambler lane off-road bike. Heavy, not good handling for a motocross bike, but hey, that's where it is. Had a lot of fun on these things. Had a lot of stupid fun on motorcycles. And I plan on continuing. And this is going to make a cool little scrambler. What does this have to do with primitive archery? Placing limits on ourselves. As far as things go, if you want perfection, buy a brand new road bike, a crotch rocket. Everything is perfect. There's no clunking, no false neutrals. This doesn't have false neutral. Engine spins over like a sewing machine, but you know, you can equate that to a compound bow or a crossbow, modern compound crossbow. I want to be as efficient and perfect as possible, but there are those of us who are holdouts against that. We want to place limits on ourselves. A built-in handicap, as it were. But yup, I think it's time to turn this into a scrambler. I don't know, I might have to say goodbye to my beehive there, or else not. We'll see. Thank you for watching. It's about time to open the gates and get back to work. And as you noticed, the temperatures have dropped in ye old Michigan. Have a good one. Pardon me, this is clamped funny.